Hey guys, what is up? Super K-Man Rocks here, and we are here for my LTA North Upper Bracket Round Number 1 overview and analysis video here in the spring split. It is playoff time finally here in the LTA North. We've spent quite a long time in the regular season going over a couple of series per video and kind of talking about how, the top teams are very separate from the bottom tier teams. Finally, we get into some matches that actually matter, and more specifically, we get into some best of fives. With everything that's happened across the rest of the world so far this year, the LTA is of course still the only region in the entire world without a game to go past game number 3. We will see if that breaks here today because we've got some best of fives to cover. I'm excited. I hope you guys are as well. If you are, let me know down in the comment section below. Of course, we've been covering the LTA all year long. We've been covering every game from the LTA for what, 4 years now on this channel, as we have for every major region. So definitely have a pretty good idea of where these teams are before coming in to these games, but a lot still to prove. Again, because of the format and because the way the bracket is structured, these teams have a little bit more to lose, or I guess a little bit less to lose, a little bit more to give in the beginning of this tournament because they still have their extra life. The teams that are, the 5 or the 6 seeds, your 100 Thieves, your Dignitoses, they don't have as much to give. They can't afford to lose a series like the teams today. The winner will be moving on to winners finals already because that's how the bracket is structured. The losers will be moving down to lower round 1. So without further ado, let's get into the video. If you are new here, what we're going to do is go series by series, talking about the advantages and disadvantages that each team was able to generate. I'll be giving a player of the series and a dud of the series for each series that we cover. And at the end of the video, I will be talking about the updated bracket, and we'll kind of be going over and previewing the matchups that we're going to get this upcoming weekend in the lower bracket. But as per usual, most of today will be spent talking about the games we got this past weekend, so why don't we just jump into it? I don't want to waste too much time at the beginning of the video. Let's get into the analysis itself. We started off with the matchup that was probably a bit more predictable on paper, certainly the one where I think people kind of had a pretty good idea of how it was going to land going into it. It was the number 1 seeded FlyQuest taking on the number 4 seeded Shopify Rebellion, and Fly is going to decimate this series. They're going to win it 3-0, although I will say games 2 and 3 were actually pretty back and forth, all things considered. A couple of, heroes, I'll say, for Shopify in each of those games, kind of depending on who you want to point out. Game 1 was kind of a slaughter, but overall, Fly definitely still had full control of the series here, and once again, another series that does not go past 3 games, so at least for now, we still maintain that record of no game 4 yet in North America, at least in Tier 1 in NA, but Fly, very confidently coming out here and dominating a series in the way that I think we kind of wanted to see from them. I'm filming this video a couple of hours, or basically an hour after the All-Pros get announced for the LTA, and FlyQuest did get every single spot in First Team All-Pro. You guys know my thoughts and opinions on that. I think it's utterly ridiculous, and I can't really fathom how anybody would vote like that, but it is what it is, and FlyQuest kind of living up to that expectation now that it's on them in this series. For Shopify, they're happy to be here. Like, they are just happy to be a top 4 seed. They were not projected to be at any point throughout the year, even going back to the preseason when we were all a lot higher on this team and what they could be. They were at best like everybody's 5th place team in the LTA, and throughout this year, they've probably been worse than that. They just pull off an upset against 100 Thieves in the group stage, and all of a sudden they're now sitting here as the number 4 seed. They put up a decent fight, but definitely not enough to be able to overcome Fly, who's one of the best teams, if not easily the best team in North America right now. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Player of the series for me is going to go to Bwipo in the top lane. Didn't really have to think about this one all that much. People might point out the Mordekaiser game in game number 2, and it certainly wasn't ideal, but honestly, it forced Shopify into some really awkward situations in the mid and late game. So, even if it wasn't doing a ton of damage or really much at all, like, at least it was doing that. At least it was forcing them to think about how they wanted to play the game because he could separate somebody from those fights, but he was awesome in game 1 on the Ornn, absolutely decimated Fudge in that first game, and then the Croc went wild in game number 3. Like, the Renekton was phenomenal. He was easily the most impactful player in that game. To me, this wasn't really a question on who should get player of the series. I know Broadcast ended up giving it to Masu. I'm super confused by that. Like, I get that Masu was better in game 2, and I think that's probably what it is, right? Is that the Senna just ended up completely outpacing Shopify, but I would argue that Busio was definitely the player of the game in game number 2, even really in game number 1. He was excellent throughout the beginning of this series and, set up a lot for the rest of the team, and it really was Bwipo who was taking taking most advantage of that, in my opinion. As you guys know, I gave Busio my MVP vote, and so I'm certainly a little bit biased in that regard, but I was just concerned, or I guess more so confused, by Masu getting player of the series, because I just didn't really see that. But Bwipo to me was the pretty obvious choice. He's been the best top laner in North America. I like Thanatos, and I think you can make the argument that Thanatos is a more mechanically talented player than someone like Bwipo is, but in terms of like actual what we're seeing on the Rift, I think Bwipo gets more attention from FlyQuest, and I certainly think he's a much bigger deal in the mid to late game for this team than Thanatos is for Cloud9. So I would consider that kind of to be the separation. Of course, Masu still was very good, but I want to give a big shout out to Busio. I think he really was arguably the best player for FlyQuest throughout this series. Again, I think it's either Bwipo or Busio, depending on who you want to give it to. Busio was a little bit better, I think, in Game 2, but I don't think he was quite as impactful in Game 3, so it's really just up to you in that regard. But he was definitely player of the game for Game number 1. Absolutely decimated Shopify on the Alistair, just completely blew the game up, and he was really good on the Rel in terms of setting things up in Game 2. Like, Busio's just been excellent this year. I don't really see enough people talking about this. I think he's been by far the best support in North America. I still see people talking about Core JJ like he's in that conversation. I think Core has very firmly been number 3 across this year so far. Vulcan has been better than Core, but I don't think Vulcan's been as good as Busio, as good as Vulcan has been. Like, that's just where the support rankings are, and Busio's playing the best league of his entire life at the current moment. So I'm really happy to see that he's become a primary playmaker and really the one to start every single engage for the best team in the league, and I think that that's really a big reason why they're so consistent in terms of a lot of their late games. So credit to Busio. I will continue to pound the table for him because as somebody who's kind of been a Busio hater at times in the past, maybe not a hater, I don't think that's necessarily accurate, more so just kind of tempering expectations on who Busio is as a player in the past. I'm really excited to see him actually break out this year and to me show a lot of signs that he hasn't shown, at least at the tier 1 level in previous years. I also do want to point out that Quad was really good in the mid lane. I think that might go a bit under the radar because Palafox was quite bad, and we'll talk about that on the other side. Inspired was totally fine as a setup man, as a facilitator here. I think Busio was definitely more impactful as a setup, engage threat and a facilitator, whether it be on the Alistair and Rel in games 1 and 2, or even really on the Nami in game number 3. I think he did a bit more than Inspired did in this series, and generally, I think I'm a little bit lower on what Inspired's been in 2025 than a lot of other people. I didn't have him as my all-pro, although I think most people should have him as their all-pro, unless you're crazy like me, so you're generally fine having it there. I just don't know if I've been like crazy impressed with Inspired, and this was kind of a good example of that, where I think he did the little things well, but he didn't really do any of the big things that we kind of know him for all that well. But everybody else on the team was really fine. I know I kind of shit-talked Masu. He was totally fine in the series. It's not like he made any mistakes or anything like that. He wasn't stepping up too far forward or being a nuisance for the team. I just don't know if I necessarily would have considered him the main character of any of these games. So Fly dominating 3-0, more so what we expected between these two teams. And then for Shopify on the other side, there are a couple of things to point out. I think first and foremost, it's not really the way they lost in the regular season. Some of it is, like the mental errors are definitely something that is akin to how they lost in the regular season, but it's a lot of the mechanical problems that really ended up biting them in the ass as we went further along throughout these games. Palafox is going to get done of the series for me almost entirely for that Azir game in game number 2. That was pretty horrendous. I think he's not getting let off the hook in the same way that B-Boy is getting let off the hook, because B-Boy probably played his worst series of the entire year here against FlyQuest. I saw, it was so bad that I saw people online being like, why does B-Boy have a team, clearly having never watched Shopify before? And trust me, we'll get into that. I think that there were a couple of good moments for B-Boy, just not in game number 3, but Palafox ended up being the one that I thought was the worst throughout the entire series. I mean, we got to talk about it, right? Like, he buys QSS and then Mercurials to go into Mordekaiser only to sell it because it doesn't cleanse Mordalt, and that's a change that's been in the game for like a year. Like, I know that Mord's not very common in pro play, but you are a professional mid laner and you built that and did that on a playoff stage. Like, it's completely unacceptable. There's no explanation for why that would ever happen for a player like Palafox, who should be so in tune on how to play this game. Like, it's completely unacceptable. And honestly, I'm kind of giving him dud of the series for that alone because it's just absurd. But he played the Azir game really poorly. He was not good at all on the Orianna in game 3. It's not like he was good on the Annie when they got blasted in game number 1. He did not have a game where I think you could justify his performance, and that's kind of been the case for him for a majority of the year. But it wasn't just him. Again, B-Boy was really in the running for dud of the series here, almost entirely because of that game 3 on the Xayah. Horrendous stuff coming in from B-Boy. I mean, truly unacceptable gameplay down the stretch there, especially because he had so much gold on the Xayah and he was such a win condition for them. For him to be so awful in a lot of those fights, to be out of position, to actively be selling his team's success chance, it's not good. It's not fair to the rest of this team, and I imagine it had to be pretty frustrating. Again, B-Boy is a player that I think has been pretty consistent throughout his entire career, even when he loses, like even going back to his time like on Misfits, with, what was that, like 6 years ago now, or some point in the LEC, or I guess at the time in the EULCS, he was never a player that when he lost, he was super out of position. He was always somebody who just failed to find as much impact in the game as other AD carries did, and I think that that can kind of be the case now. Like there are a lot of games where it feels like he should be more involved than he is, but typically the problem is not him stepping up too far. That was definitely the case here, which is why it felt so out of character for B-Boy. You just expect him to be a lot more stable than what he actually was in this series, which is a bit frustrating, especially because I think Seos played fine. He certainly wasn't as good as Busio on the other side, but it certainly wasn't good either. Contracts had a pretty bad series, all things considered. He just needs to be able to carry on things. That's where we're at with this team, is he needs to be the number one guy. It's clear that he's the best player on this team, and so when you're picking Skarner and Dr. Mundo, you're taking away your ability to actually be that primary option, and I just don't really like that draft strategy. Fudge was not nearly as good as Bwipo, got obliterated in a couple of the games in this series, even if some of them weren't entirely his fault. Like game one was his fault, the rest of the series, whatever, man. Like it is what it is. Like you're playing Yorick into Mordekaiser and no one's been able to play Yorick well at this level. The Scion wasn't particularly useful. Like Shopify just doesn't have the talent to compete with FlyQuest. Nobody thought that this was going to be anything other than a 3-0 sweep. If Shopify took a game off of them, I think that would have been more of a surprise than anything we got here today. So for Fly, nice win. You're happy to be moving on to winners finals. This is more so expected. This was your reward for beating Cloud9 and getting the number one seed. Whoever got to play Shopify probably got a free buy into that round number 2. Then moving on to our second of the first round series here, and this one was much more hype in terms of what we wanted to see out of these two teams. Unfortunately, once again, we got kind of a blowout. It was the number 2 seeded Cloud9 taking on the number 3 seeded Team Liquid, and Cloud9 sweeps them 3-0. We still have yet to have a single series in the LTA North go beyond 3 games. In the LTA, full stop, go beyond 3 games. It's unbelievable to see how we've gotten here. It's just very funny to talk about how we've gotten 3 best of 5s this year so far, and all 3 of them have been 3-game sweeps, but hopefully at some point that ends up changing. Unlucky for us today, Team Liquid did not show up. And I really do think that that's the best possible way I can put it. You can blame it on a bunch of different things. You can talk about a couple of different ways that it ended up going wrong for Team Liquid, but at the end of the day, they just were not here today. Like, they did not play the game that they normally do, and I think a lot of their flaws just ended up getting exposed. A couple of things that I don't think are particularly common for Team Liquid happened here today in terms of where things went wrong, but for Cloud9, oh boy, when this team, like, clicks, it works well. Like, oh my god, this team decimated this series. It was not even remotely close in terms of the things they did right. I can go in again to a couple of particular moments. We're going to more so talk about the general feel of the series because that's kind of what we do on this channel, but man, there are a couple of really big points to point out because I think that there were a lot of skill gaps coming in this series, none more so in my opinion than Thanatos on the top side, who is going to get player of the series. Trust me, like, I want to give this to Loki as much as anybody else. His KDA is better, and so if you want to give it to Loki, be my guest. He was phenomenally mega gapped APA in the mid lane. This was not particularly close in terms of how this mid lane matchup ended up going specifically in terms of pressure throughout the early and back half of this series, but Thanatos really took things home for Cloud9. I mean, the Rumble game in Game 2 was gorgeous from him. The Gnar game in Game 3 was untouchable from him. Like, truly, that's just how it ended up going. Impact actually had quite a bit of gold on Yorick, not for good reasons, but because, once again, you know, no team outside of the top teams in the LPL actually know how to handle Yorick and know how to play the champion even a little bit. Every single time Impact existed, he was trying to team fight 5v5 with Yorick as a champion. Why do we even pick him in the first place? Like, genuinely, it's got to be some sort of mental illness at this point, but Thanatos absolutely taking advantage of it. And trust me, I'll get to Impact. This guy got an all-pro vote. Not an all-pro vote. This guy got third team all-pro. People are smoking crack. Like, there is no other explanation. Again, we'll get into that, but Thanatos was awesome in this series, and I'm glad to kind of, you know, get back onto the Thanatos train. I think generally speaking, some people were upset, you know, rightfully so, that I kind of pointed out that Sniper might have been my second choice for All-Pro. He might have been my second team All-Pro with Thanatos third team. I don't know if I necessarily stand by that anymore. The more so I kind of thought about it, Sniper was better, I would say, in a very specific stretch of the split. Like, the games where Sniper was better were probably the best games of those players, but, like, yeah, Sniper's bad games were really bad, and Thanatos doesn't really have bad games. I don't really know why I stopped valuing consistency for that, so Thanatos definitely still somebody that I'm really looking looking out for, but overall, like, he decimated this series, and Impact is not even half the player that Thanatos is right now, and so to see him generate the leads that he did, it's just awesome, and to see him decimate team fights, a place where he was supposed to be weak coming out of the LCK Challengers League, that's also incredibly valid. And then for Loki, like, this was my first team All-Pro pick over APA. He was really the other one that I was considering. Loki backed that up. He, like, absolutely proved that that was the right choice in this series here. He decimated Team Liquid, specifically on the Azir and the Tristana. Those are the two games that I'm really looking at and just being like, oh my god, like, you gotta chill, man. Even the Corki, like, the Corki was still incredibly good in game number 2. It just was like, oh man, like, this guy's so mechanically talented when he wants to be. When he gets resources, he's really good at using them. He didn't do this at all in the Challengers League. This is basically the opposite of what he was in the Challengers League as a player. So I'm really happy to see that they've taken their solo laners that, you know, have been big pieces for them. Like, imports are such a big deal in North America, and really gotten the most out of them at the current moment. Of course, Sven and Vulcan were really good. They weren't very good in lane. Not that that should be surprising. Sven's weakness as a player is laning phase, and Jan was the only one with even a pulse on the side of Team Liquid in this series, but they generally played fine. Blabber was really good as a facilitator. Again, like, every single time this team indexes into playing Blabber on things like Maokai and Skarner, and like these more facilitative, engage-oriented champions, this team just wins. They run into trouble when they ask him to be a carry, because, you know, he's okay at it, but he's better at being a facilitator. It's just the rest of this team wants resources. Let Blabber enable everybody else on the map. That's where Cloud9 has found a ton of their success, and I think that's once again where they found it in this series. But I got a lot to talk about when it comes to Team Liquid, because I think there has been some misconceptions about what Team Liquid is as a team. I think some people are sitting there being like, well, Yuji coming in is going to be this gigantic upgrade and is immediately going to fix all of the consistency problems for Team Liquid. I've talked a lot about how I do not think Umti has been the problem this split. In fact, I've been very vocal about how I think Impact has been the biggest problem on the team, that Core JJ's not been nearly as effective as people are giving him credit for, and lo and behold, like, I feel like it's coming to fruition right now. You know, I'm not going to try and say this as some sort of catch-all and say that, oh, any criticism against me is bad, because I don't believe that. I'm actually really happy when you guys disagree with my takes down in the comments. I think it's really interesting to hear other people's opinions, and sometimes it does update mine, as we already talked about with Thanatos, but I think it's a pretty funny coincidence that basically every time that I'm against the grain, that, you know, people don't like my takes, they age well. And every time I am with the grain and I kind of just go with the flow and my takes line up with what consensus is, that's when everything gets flown into oblivion. It's just kind of funny how that ends up being the case. I should go against the grain more often, because being anti-Core JJ came into effect in this series. He is dud of the series, and to me, it's not even particularly close. I say that. Impact was really bad, but Core was awful in this series. There's no way to look at how he played the game and feel good about it any way. Like, his 2v2s were fine. He was generally okay in the early game. I still give a lot of that credit to Jan, who's winning lane on Smolder and on Zeri every single game, because the dude is just that good at playing 2v2 in the bot lane. But you watch Core during a lot of these team fights, and he's just doing the wrong thing almost every single time. And I'm not trying to sit here say, you know, and say that I know more than Core JJ, but it's easy to look when you see the whole map like we do and be like, yeah, man, you're making the wrong decision. Like, that's the difference, is I get the full view. He has to react in, you know, limited time and limited information, and it just is what it is. He's got to be better than this. Like, Vulcan mega gapped Core JJ, but quite frankly, Core mega gapped himself. He just made a lot of bad decisions, constantly allowing Blabber to basically do whatever he wanted in any of these team fights, doing absolutely nothing to trade his life to try and save, you know, positioning for TL. I'm not a fan, and maybe people are going to argue with me in the comment section and say I'm being too harsh on Core and that he doesn't deserve dead of the series, that I'm stupid for not seeing the little things that he does, but I'm sorry. I see the little things, and I do not think they outweigh the big mistakes that he consistently keeps making, and I'm getting a little bit frustrated with him as a player. APA was miserable in this series. He was in contention for dead of the series really up until game 3. Like, his Nico was generally fine. He wasn't the problem in that game. Impact sold everything. Like, there's just nothing else to say. You're playing Yorick as a team fight champion. You're basically playing 4v5. Like, there's no explanation for that. The Galio was also not good in game number 2. And then, again, I'm not going to say I feel vindicated, but, like, dude, are we still trying to pretend that Umti is the only problem on this team? Are we still trying to pretend that he's the only thing that needs to be fixed? Like, APA played worse than he normally does. I'm certainly going to say that, and I think that translated a lot to why Team Liquid struggled here. But as somebody who's been talking about how Umti's actually been pretty good this split in particular, not before this split, because I was an Umti hater before this split, but specifically since whatever, like April or whenever spring started. Like, you watch Yuji play Nefiri, and the game's not his fault, but he really can't do anything. You watch Yuji play Xin Zhao, and he's like running it down, and it's like, I love Yuji, but this is a bad situation right now for a jungler. There's too many things going wrong. Team Liquid has some of the worst macro I've ever seen these players have, which is unacceptable for a team with Core JJ and Impact. It really is at any level, regardless of who's in the jungle, and now they're getting outskilled, which is just, it's not good, man. Spawn's belt is not strong enough to be able to salvage the problems that this team has. That being said, all of that complaining out of the way, lower bracket runs happen all the time in North America. Teams lose and look outclassed at the beginning of the playoffs and then just click and figure it out and figure out how to go forward and be a top 2 or a top 1 team. We see it basically every single year that some team just has it mentally figured out midway through the year and just, you know, it all just turns around. That could be Team Liquid again. They've done it before, but right now, Cloud9 is a gigantic tier above anything that Team Liquid has to offer. Cloud9 and Fly are the only 2 teams that I'm considering in the upper echelon of North America until proven otherwise, and C9 more than deserves that with the performance they gave here today, and I'm just glad to see that an org that's kind of been known for not following through on a lot of their hype throughout a lot of the past couple of splits finally starts to feel a little bit more surefire. And that being said, maybe they collapse down the stretch and lose losers finals to Team Liquid anyways, but at least for now, Cloud9 is doing everything they're supposed to do to establish themselves as a team that can compete to go to MSI. All right, but that is going to do it for my LTA North upper bracket round number 1 overview and analysis video. Up on the screen, the updated bracket after that round number 1. Fly and C9 with their sweeps, of course, are going to be moving on to round number 2, winners finals, if you will. Just as a reminder, winners finals is not a qualification series for MSI. While there are 2 representatives from the LTA going to MSI, they're not both from the LTA North. One will be from the North, one will be from the South. You have to win the entire league in order to represent the region internationally. Only one North American team will be at the midseason invitational, so you still got to keep your foot on the gas. It's not just about winning winners finals. You have to win the finals themselves, but we'll talk about Fly C9 next week because they're not playing this upcoming weekend. That's going to be lower bracket round 1. Team Liquid taking on Dignitas, Shopify Rebellion taking on 100 Thieves. Let's preview and talk about these series, starting with Team Liquid versus Dig. If TL don't win this, I mean, everything has gone wrong. Like, the entire thing's got to get burned down, and at some point you got to figure out what you want to do moving forward on the top side of the map. Like, that's where we're at with Team Liquid, regardless of if they won the split in winter. Like, if you can't get past Dignitas in the playoffs, it's absolute worst case scenario. If this team loses this series, it's doomed. I do not think this series will be breaking the 3-0 trend. I imagine Team Liquid will come out very motivated and be able to crush that one. And then for Shopify versus 100 Thieves, as much as I'd like to sit here and be like, yeah, well, the last time they played, Shopify won, and so they're going to be better moving into this next series. That's not going to be the case. That's not going to be reality. 100 Thieves is the better of these 2 teams. It was an upset last time for a reason, and I think 100 Thieves are going to feel pretty hard done to even be down here in the lower bracket to start off. So my prediction is that 100 Thieves will pick up the win. Maybe that's the series that ends up breaking the 3-game streak here in North America, but it will be 100 Thieves and Team Liquid moving forward. I'm not picking any upsets. I think this is pretty obvious in the top 4. Feel pretty locked in to me. Let me know if you agree or disagree, if you think either Dig or Shopify have a better chance than what I'm giving them. I'm curious to know what your thoughts and opinions are on that down in the comment section below, but that's going to do it. I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like. It really does mean a lot to me. It lets me know you guys are enjoying the content, and it does help get this video out to a lot more people, which I'm always very appreciative of. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button. Of course, we're going to be covering the rest of the LTA playoffs as we do all the time on this channel, but we're also going to be covering the playoffs in all 3 of the other major regions, LEC, LCK, and LPL, obviously at different times and different schedules depending on where they end up playing, but I'm basically posting a video a day for the next month or so because the playoffs are rocking and rolling. So if you're interested in a comprehensive overview of everything going on in LoL esports, this is the place for it. Hit subscribe and hit that bell so you can be notified when those videos do go live. But with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all